Hello everyone and welcome to the Climate Action Tent. So we've hijacked this tent to address the climate emergency and highlight research that is being done throughout the university by staff, students, operations teams, artists in residence, and everyone along the way that we can think of who are doing work that's actually action-based when it comes to responding to these emergencies. So the idea for the tent came about from a conversation we'd had after the university had observation status at COP last year. And it came kind of to the conclusion that there's loads of people doing work, but we haven't been very good at highlighting or connecting with each other about the work that we've been doing. So today is a bit of an effort to tell everybody the work we've been doing and remember that we get so focused on our research that actually our researchers use ramifications or can have, and we want to start amplifying the work already. So the format for today's talk, they all follow a very similar format where they're 5 minutes talks of researchers highlighting their work. And then we'll get into a bit of a Q&A and we'll open that up to the audience. So to introduce myself, my name is Anne Kearns. I'm the Education, Public Engagement and Policy Manager in the Co-Centre for Climate, Biodiversity and Water. And in short, all that means is I talk to people about climate loads. That's my job. So I work with all sorts of stakeholders and researchers to try and engage everyone in the conversation about how we can take some actionable steps and inform changes to addressing climate issues. So on that note, I just want to take a second to recognise that climate action and all the crises we now face are complicated, layered issues. They involve a plurality of responses, and therefore in this tent we are going to make sure that we have a place of neutrality and respect where others are coming from and their approaches, and we bring together ideas and opinions and options and learn from others different to ourselves. So I'm going to hand over now shortly to our speakers. So this panel in particular, we're going to talk about how we can track and visualize climate and climate altering events in the field. It's often a really intangible conversation, climate and climate research, whereas these guys are doing great work and making it visual and showing visual or tangible, or what's the word for when you can feel something physically? That. So we're joined by 3 PhD candidates. So Katrina, Eleanor and Aideen. So Aideen McAdams is a PhD candidate in the Buckley Lab in the Department of Zoology here in Trinity. Eleanor Dunn is a PhD candidate in Geophysics section in the Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies. It has a supervisor here in Trinity. And Katrina, I don't know how to say your surname. Zoublakis is a PhD candidate who holds the Trinity's Provost Project Award from 2022 to 2026 and is based in the Department of History and Art and Architecture here in Trinity. So I'm going to ask you all, you should have a mic, so I'm going to ask you all to talk about your work for 5 minutes and then we'll get into some questions.
Okay. Yes, hello. So I am a third-year PhD student and I look at artistic interpretation and methods for public engagement, particularly related to geophysics, which can sometimes be quite a complex subject to communicate. So I'm looking at loads of different ways to get that done. And one of the ways is so Taylor Swift performed at the Aviva Stadium on June this year, and it was very hyped up. Everyone was very excited. And at the Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies, we wanted to see if we could actually measure and detect that seismic activity, so ground vibrations created by all the Taylor Swift fans during the concert, if we could detect those ground vibrations and then visualize them and see where that went from there. So I had a social media campaign alongside it, and also we tried to kind of get the word out with traditional media, and thankfully that was quite successful. But what was kind of really shocking was that we were lucky enough to detect the concert. So we placed seismometers around the Aviva Stadium as well as further afield in Dublin. And then we also have some permanent seismometers scattered around Ireland. And those permanent seismometers actually detected the concert. So the furthest away it was detected was in Wexford, so over 100 kilometers away. And that was kind of what really shocked us. And it just shows kind of the power of fandom and the power of a celebrity to kind of really draw a crowd and generate all that seismic activity. So following that, it was really about how the power of celebrity can be used to harness science communication, particularly with geophysics.
Great. Aideen, do you want to go?
So I'm Aideen. I'm a PhD candidate. I'm in third year as well in the Buckley lab here in Trinity. And my work revolves around a 2 mm snail. So we're investigating how effective irrigation can be to stabilise and re-wet a bog-like habitat called a fen up in Sligo. The snail used to live in this fen. It's a whorl snail, Vertigo gyri. It used to live in this fen up until 2007. Then continuous surveys showed that it wasn't there anymore. So we had to try and understand what went wrong. Ecologically, everything looked fine. The habitat still looked good. Nothing really seemed to have changed. But with further analyses and further investigations, we noticed that the water levels of the site had changed. So this fen is adjacent to a lake, and the lake is used as a water reservoir for the neighbouring community. So about 13,000 people rely on this lake. So water is abstracted from it. And during the summer months, when we don't have enough rainfall, this impacts the fen. So the groundwater levels drop, which prevents the water from coming up into the fen. And the snail that I investigate, Vertigo gyri, is super hydrologically sensitive. So what that basically means is if there's no water present for the snail, it'll die. And that's what happened. So the snail was first discovered in 1992 in this site up until 2007. And the question was, well, what do we do now? You know, it's clearly a human-mediated response that has caused this snail to no longer live there. So through experts a lot more intelligent and specialised than I am, they decided to put in an irrigation system. And my work is investigating whether that irrigation system is working or not. So I am in the field physically with my boots in the field, sometimes on my hands and knees searching for snails in this field to see what's going on and whether irrigation is working. And so far it seems to be improving the hydrological stability of the site, but it's given us some interesting results ecologically and on the scale related to the snail. So the snail's only 2 mm. A 5 centimetre square for it is basically the whole of Dublin County for us. So how do we figure out what's going on in this 3D space for a small snail that, and how do we visualize that and how do we interpret those results? So that's basically what my work is, and I'm using ecological assessments, looking at the plants, looking at the water levels, using the weather as well to see what maybe rainfall, droughts, evapotranspiration rates are like, and then also trying to incorporate more quantitative results. So using hydrological modelling to see how the water is flowing through this fen, through the system, again with weather events, and to try and quantify what habitat suitability means for this snail. So I'm trying again to interpret what this snail thinks is a good habitat. And when it's not there, it's quite hard to know, is this actually right or not for it? So we use another site then out in Roscommon where this snail is and use that as a reference. So yeah, that's pretty much my work. I'll pass it on.
Speaking of weather,
Hello. I'm not usually using a microphone because I shout quite loud, so let me know if I've done this wrong. My name is Katerina Zubalakis. Everyone calls me Kat, so feel free to do the same. And I study the visual culture of Earth system science in Ireland. My supervisor, Dr. Tim Stott, looks at the more broad picture, and together we're trying to create a framework to visually analyze anything in this huge field of science. So I'm really excited to be next to these two because I can look at what they do and try to figure out how to better communicate climate science based on their phenomenal practice. So it's really exciting for me. More specifically, I look at Met Éireann. I look at how they communicate. I look at their history. And I said this to Anne yesterday. I was a bit worried about being here in the tent because I do take a historical perspective. So up to this point, I'm halfway through my PhD. I've been looking at the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. In 1996, Met Éireann changed its name to Met Éireann. Before that, it was the Irish Meteorological Service. So I haven't looked at the more modern range of materials, so it's kind of funny. But yeah, I'll leave it there for now.
great, yeah. So Kat did say this yesterday, but my point was all of it is trying to understand what has happened already, what is currently happening, and how do we project accurately enough that we can create correct responses, right? Yeah, so there is a commonality. There was sense to my madness. And I guess to explain a little bit further, any of you, that like these things seem so small in isolation. Well, maybe let's say Ireland's weather in isolation versus a 2mm snail or one specific concert. So to kind of, maybe you guys can speak to a little bit more about like where these small interactions fit in the bigger systemic kind of things we all face. So I don't know who wants to take it.
I can go for weather first.
Right.
So the geographic positioning of Ireland makes it extremely important for the weather for the rest of Europe and of course the rest of the world, because this is one Earth system, right? And so when weather is coming over from anywhere to the west of Ireland, it's coming across the Atlantic, it's gaining or losing power, it's reaching Ireland, it's doing whatever it's going to do here, and then it's moving on to the rest of Europe. So historically, Ireland was extremely important to know the weather, which is why it was so critical that the Irish government controlled their own weather service, which is why they established the Free State Meteorological Service, that was the first name, in 1936. And they steadily took control over different pieces of weather prediction, weather forecasting, climate, agricultural weather, all of these different pieces that Met Éireann is involved in a kind of partnership with the British. So it was a really interesting collaborative nature during the war. And then I'll leave it there for now.
Okay.
So on a completely different scale, you're looking at all of Ireland, and I'm focusing on a 2mm snail. But in the broader context of things, the snail vertigo gyri is really only found in Ireland, Britain, and Europe.
Speaking of weather.
Yeah. Ireland, always changing. So this snail, the project I think is really important in Ireland because it's the first project that was granted under the Habitats Directive, Article 6.4, under imperative reasons of overriding public importance. So basically what that means is we can continue to abstract from the lake despite it having negative ecological consequences, so long as we are mitigating those consequences in some way. So we can continue to take water because there's over 13,000 people who rely on this water source until we find another place where we can get the water from. And I am the consequence. So I am investigating this irrigation. Is it mitigating the abstraction pressures? So we can use this project in Ireland to then look further afield. I take a lot of methods from the UK and Europe to track our snail here in Ireland and see if it's responding to the same ecological parameters that it's responding to across Europe. And this snail is also an ecological indicator of habitat quality in the fens in Ireland. So if we can come up with a way to improve this habitat, to put the snail back in, then we can hopefully have a more robust framework to assess fens across the world, well, mainly in Europe and in Britain. So it's, scaling up from a 2mm snail to a half a hectare habitat to Ireland, Britain, and Europe. Hopefully. Ask me in a year and a half if that works.
So I think, one of the main questions when I was talking about this to journalists and even getting comments on social media was, why do we care about this? Why are you spending our money? What does this all mean? And I think for this, you definitely need to just track Taylor Swift's movements around her world tour. So everywhere she's gone, research groups have popped up. I mean, it started in Seattle like 2 years ago when this was kind of first announced that her fans had generated this Swiftquake. And ever since, everywhere she's been, there have been research groups popping up in Australia, all over Europe, and I'm sure there'll be some in Canada as well when she finishes her world tour there later this year. And I think this is really a collaborative effort between all of those research groups. So we've already started those conversations where we're collecting all of this different data that's been collected using different types of seismometers. There have been all the concerts have taken place at different stadiums, and then we can really use all this data to definitely build on the bigger picture. So looking at a more kind of local scale, we can look at stadium stability and look at how seismic activity generated during a concert can impact stadium structure health, but looking kind of in a more broader sense, looking at how we can localize this seismic activity, and if we can use this seismic activity to understand what fans were doing during the concert, and if we can actually use this data to understand their movements, this can be used for a much broader sense, and we can apply it to cities to see if we can record seismic data and use that to understand what is going on in a city at any given time, which is great. I mean, for things like the COVID-19 pandemic, if a similar thing like that happened again, we could very easily track what's going on in a city, maybe, you know, use it for tracking lockdowns and everything like that. So it definitely kind of fits into a more broader sense that isn't just looking at concerts.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to ask one more question up here and then we'll open it up to the floor. So everyone get your questions ready. So I think one of the biggest challenges I certainly face is people have a really hard time visualizing climate change and what that means for them, their day-to-day, their life. And it's kind of, I feel sometimes it's maybe a bit corrupted in the narrative around climate change, that it's like, oh no, people couldn't possibly understand or visualize. And I suppose what I want to ask you guys who are currently working really hard to visualize it, is that still an accurate narrative that people have trouble visualizing? Or do you think people are maybe more aware of some of the things now?
I can go first. So there have been such an array of research now with different ways to visualize this kind of climate change process. So I think there is such a wealth of information out there that it's definitely not as big an issue that people might face compared to back in the day. And I think there are huge other issues at play when it comes to understanding the climate crisis. And I mean, one part of my research is trying to convey that seismic waves that are generated from just, you know, me walking up to this stage, the dart going along the Irish coast, these are all generating these seismic waves which are propagating out from us. And seismic waves don't respect borders, they don't respect countries. And this is something which I hope can be used for people to build a stronger empathy for our planet, if they understand that everything is connected. And in Ireland, with our seismometers, we can detect an earthquake that happens in Japan or Mexico. And we can, you know, if it's not a big earthquake, we can detect, for instance, a quarry explosion in Wexford or a concert in this case. And that hopefully, through this research, talking about how seismicity happens and how it happens everywhere, that this can, help people build a stronger empathy for our planet and understand how everything is connected, and really, think about how things are happening within and under our feet.
I really love that answer. I wish I was on such a big scale as well too. But I think it is changing. I think people have a lot more access and resources to what climate change is. I mean, it was that narrative of global warming to begin with, and I think a lot of the Irish population were getting a bit happy. That means, summer's going to be lovely and warm. But it's showing us the opposite. You know, everything's getting quite mild and unpredictable. But in my field, I chat a lot to farmers. So they are the ones who are literally out in the field every day. And this year I was chatting to one of the farmers, and because it was such a wet summer, and unseasonably wet summer, they weren't able to put the silage out for ages. And then it was, I think, 2 dry days and all of them were out. Every tractor was out, every field was full. All of them were just go, 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 go. So I think in order to sort of understand and see and make this information accessible, we have to talk to people on the levels that they're from and on the basis that they work. So the farmers, they know exactly what the weather is supposed to be like at this time of year, and if it's not, then that has big impacts on not only their work but our whole country. We rely so much on our farming industry. We export so much of our meat and our dairy, that if the weather is starting to change. If summers are getting really wet, then we might even run into more issues of cows having to be in barns and running into more sort of infectious diseases that come along with this damp, mild weather that we can get in Ireland. But not only that, from being in the field every month from April to October, I get to kind of myself see how the climate obviously affects monthly and how things are changing, but my data is also showing that there's just huge variability. So one year does not equal the next year, does not equal the next year, and it's trying to find sense in all this variable data and trying to pick up the trends and see what is going on. And I think the longer we talk about climate issues and the climate crisis, the more people are becoming aware of it and aren't as afraid of it. I don't think it's, the narrative isn't as negative anymore. It's a lot now, what can we do? And how are you impacted? And what can we do to help you? And what issues are you facing in the world? So yeah, I think it is changing. And I hope it continues to change and we can continue to improve the climate crisis.
Great.
I have a lot of opinions about this question. I think I'll take it from an education standpoint because that's where I feel the most comfortable. I teach climate science to primary school students, to first-year undergrads, and this year I'll be trying out to secondary school students here in Dublin. And I'd say going in, I thought I would be doing a lot more teaching. I thought I would have to tell, especially the 11-year-olds, what climate change is, what climate science means. As you can probably guess where I'm going, that was not the case at all. They were well aware of what's going on, and they were very motivated to make their own difference and figure out how they can contribute to a broader narrative of mitigating climate change, not only in Ireland, but also globally. Our young people are very excited, so I was really happy to see that. I don't think the difficulty is visualizing climate change. I think it's coping with climate anxiety. I know myself, when I started my project, reading really grim climate science all day certainly affected my mental health and my own well-being because I was feeling quite pessimistic. What can I do to make a difference? Why haven't they figured it out already? Why is this still a problem when we've known for so long? So it was definitely hard and frustrating. I think what's most important is to focus on the optimism and the positive outcomes that we've noticed already, whether that's in the classroom, in the field, at the Taylor Swift concert, wherever it is that you're seeing a bit of hope, and doing your best to enact change in your small circles. I can think of a family member in particular who still does not believe in climate change. I find that very difficult and very frustrating, but I feel that it is my responsibility to help her understand that this is an issue that she needs to cop onto and do her part to help with.
Sorry, I'm smiling at the cop on. I enjoyed that. I think that's a really valid point. I think to all your points, I think we as researchers can support more in that. Well, these are the range of actionable steps you could take that we know aren't harmful yet and are seeming to incrementally make things better. And I think we maybe need to do a little bit more work as institutes in getting some of that ongoing research going. And one of the ways we do that is with partnering with communities or partnering with schools and getting that work going and testing how much people want to change, right? Like, it's all well and good if we're like, never drive a car again. But the weather today is difficult in Ireland where you don't have a bus route to do those kind of things. So it's working together as stakeholders, and that's what the Co-Centre is doing. We're trying to get everyone on that journey with us and communicating evidence-based, informed policy as much and where we can. I'm going to stop talking now. Were there any other questions? Yeah. Jenny is coming. Okay.
Why did you choose snails?
Yeah, so the question was, why did I choose snails? I didn't really choose the project for the snails, being honest. I chose it because I really wanted to get into climate work and into hands-on restoration work and work that is directly impacted by policy. So the project that I'm on is looking at how irrigation improves the habitat for a 2 millimeter snail. And it was the first project granted in Ireland under the IROPI, so it's imperative reasons of overriding public importance. So I saw that that was advertised, and I come from a lower income background, and it was a funded project. So it ticked all the boxes, and it was hands-on work. I'm a zoologist as my undergraduate degree, so I did want something that was related to animals. But again, I wanted hands-on restoration, rehabilitation work. So that's why I chose the project, not necessarily because of the snail, but because of all the facets. It ticked every box for me. It was. So, yeah, so the snails are reliant on the habitat, the fen habitat. And fen habitats are one of the most threatened habitats, wetland habitats in Europe at the moment. Ireland has lost nearly 80% of its fen-type habitats. They're similar to a bog, so they have a peatland, but instead of stagnant water, they've got spring water moving through them. So yeah, the snail is an indicator of the habitat quality. So the fen that I work on ecologically looks quite good. The snail should be there, but it's not. So there's something else going on, and then we figured out it was the hydrology. So it's a brilliant indicator of habitat, and it can tell you kind of immediately what's going on and what's wrong. They only live 18 months, so if it's a bad year, the whole population could be gone. So yeah, it was more the project rather than specifically the snail. Thanks.
I have a lot of questions about the snail, but I'm going to ask a question that I'd like all of you to think about and respond to if you would. Kat, you mentioned that the kids that you've talked to are very enthusiastic. They were very action-oriented. And as if you couldn't tell from my accent, I'm from the United States. And I think one of our biggest challenges there is getting people motivated who are not children to maybe make changes to their way of life. And in the US, we have a very consumer-driven economy. And I think one of the biggest obstacles is people feel entitled to live a certain life, and they work hard, and they think they should be able to, you know, have all the accoutrements that come with that success. And I'd like each of you to talk about how do you overcome a challenge like that? Because clearly climate requires all of us to do our bit. So the kids are ready to go. The adults maybe not in some places. So how would you address something like that in the research and the work that you're doing?
So I definitely think in relation to my work, you know, getting celebrities on board is definitely a very strong influence. I mean, this has taken me into the realm of Swift studies, which is a massive research area all about Taylor Swift. And I mean, there really is evidence that she has such a pull, I mean, particularly with her 2018 political endorsement. And there, you know, there is evidence that that did have some level of sway in terms of voter registration and things like that. So I think she can definitely have some pull in terms of climate change as well. And I mean, one thing that I'm still working on is getting her to be a co-author on my paper. I've not been that successful yet, but I think celebrity influence is definitely something which can be harnessed, because oftentimes the people that really could make such a big difference are the millionaires and billionaires. And I mean, Taylor Swift is one of those. And if, you know, if the politicians aren't going to, or the really big, Elon Musk is of the world, aren't going to make a change, then I think really we should start with trying to get that celebrity pull in terms of climate change.
Thanks for coming. I struggle with this question the most because it is one that hits very close to home for me, as I kind of hinted to. I think the place to start, as I kind of suggested, is in your own families, is in your own communities. Whoever you can speak to about climate change and climate action is definitely the way to go. And I think it's also really important to recognize, like we've all said, where people are coming from. Because, for example, when I moved to Ireland and I saw coal burning in the fireplace, I was shocked. I was like, oh my God, you can't be burning coal anymore. Are you serious? And then it was cleverly pointed out to me that this individual burning coal on their farm in Roscommon, actually, has a way smaller footprint than I do, jet setting around, flying home to Seattle, visiting my family in Greece. My parents are Greek, if that's not clear from my name. So remembering the context that individual people are in, and then responding in whatever way you can to kind of maybe bring them a little bit closer to climate action is my suggestion.
Great, yeah. I think that's a lovely place to finish. I will say on a hopeful note, I was in the beauticians in Stoneybatter the other day, and they were all having a great conversation about restorative gardening and Mary Reynolds and all her chat. So I didn't have to say anything for once. But I think that's part of it as well. It's finding actions that appeal to people and then talking climate later on. So Maria's going to speak to that a little bit shortly. So we have lots more conversations coming up during the day, if anyone else is around. Talking about all the different ways we can be talking about climate and are talking about climate within Trinity and further afield, and how those things can lead to real action instead of just driving up concern or driving kind of division as well, like how we bring people back around the table. So on that note, I'd like to thank our lovely speakers for their great contribution.